Hey, and welcome back to the Future of Photography. I'm Chris, I'm back, and Adrian, Imar, Jeremiah are here as well. Hello.
Hi all.
Hey.
Hi.
So we were recording
Welcome back,
this.
Chris.
Thank you. I missed you. We're recording this on the 14th of November, 2020. Any news? Anything happened since last episode?
There was a thing about
possible.
a Mac event, wasn't there? That's got me intrigued. There's got to be a TFOP angle on that somewhere.
You know, I was thinking about that because they were harping on about how the FaceTime camera, the one at the top of the display, how that's so much better, but they're still putting 720p cameras in there. They still haven't upgraded the resolution on those. I don't get it.
So can I ask, right, why do people get in such a fuss about a 720p webcam? Why would you want to send any more than that over the web?
Yeah.
What is the deal there? It's like, I've got a 4K webcam. Oh, big deal.
Well, what are you sending me right now? You have a Lumix?
Yeah, but I'm not using the
Panasonic?
FaceTime camera in my
Fuji?
Mac though. So I'm sending you 1080p, probably 25 frames or something like that. But that's because I only have a really cheap converter and I can't actually decide what to send you.
This sounds like a lot like, why would anybody want a color TV?
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly,
so
it's
the
all
thing,
about the story.
What kind of ego have you got to have to want a FaceTime camera that's greater than 720p?
I have
big
one
one.
in this. I have one in this iMac that I'm sitting in front of.
Oh, what does that do then?
Well, you know what high resolution does in cameras? You downside, you shrink it down, and it's sharper than if you shot it at that low resolution in the first place. So there is something about this.
And then you squish it and put it over the web. Yeah.
That's scary.
Well,
I'm not going to tell
Fascinating
anyone
for the
the
audience.
bit rates that you are coming in through because they are so low that it doesn't really matter what cameras we have. Anyway, let's get into this episode. And this episode, Jeremiah has done some work to prepare that. The title is Fictional Storytelling in Photography. And I guess it's kind of right down your alley because isn't that what you do all the time with, well, not just photography, but with film and movies and things?
well, I try to split my time between reality and fantasy. How's that?
Okay.
That sounds like a great place. Can I come join you?
You are joining me right now.
Which is this, though? Is this the fantasy space or the real
I haven't
space?
decided yet. Yeah, I mean, I think this would be part of an overall view of documentary photography, storytelling in photography, and split it into, kind of the reality, which is photojournalism, and overall documentary as one approaches, kind of using the camera for revelations to the public on newsworthy events or emotional events or family events that one takes from one's life. I thought I would take a slightly different view and just engage us here and the audience in documentary, non-documentary storytelling or personal inventions using photography and photography's impulse to draw us into something that feels real, feels truthful. That's something that photography seems to have been able to achieve over its, 200 years or 150 years of kind of expressive, technical, and artistic use. Anyway, without further ado, I thought I would just start with a kind of a little run of the history here, because storytelling in a fabulous way began really at the advent of photography itself, and I kind of used the Cottonley fairies, I think that's how you pronounce it. Elsie Wright shot them, Francis Griffin. They lived near Cottonley, near Bradford. And those of you who are in England know what I'm talking about. And these are pictures that caught the eye of Arthur Conan Doyle, and he illustrated an article on fairies, and he commissioned these in 1920. And Doyle, as we may know, he was a spiritualist, which
like many people back then.
Yeah, I just put it down to enormous amounts of laudanum.
There's certainly something about that, yes.
Absinthe.
Wasn't that more Coleridge?
No, well, the whole Pre-Raphaelites, all of those, they were big consumers of laudanum, which is an opiate, and created some really wonderful things. And I encourage people to actually explore some of these things, because they appear to be real images of children surrounded by real fairies. As kind of history moves on, and the next controversial images that I pointed out is Matthew Brady, who's a very, very famous war photographer, shot a tremendous amount in the Civil War, and his pictures are, in a way, a memory for us collectively. But he was discovered to have manipulated objects, bodies, moving them around to create a more dynamic image. And that kind of position in terms of the kind of war photography, there was a woman, Gladys Cockburn Lang, who was evidently supposed to be the widow of a deceased British photographer, who made these incredible images of dog fights and bodies falling out of plane until and really were very powerfully received in the West. Of course, then people in the 1980s found that they were done using models and totally manufactured. That didn't rob them of the impact they had, but they were manufactured. And later on, when we go into the picks of the week, I'm going to draw some attention to that again. I'm going to
there's an interesting thing there, isn't there? Because around conflict photography, because there's a significant number of very famous photographs that are always questioned. So, raising the flag on Iwo Jima, that's been questioned, hasn't it? And was it Kappa that shot the Spanish soldier being shot?
Yeah. But we don't know. I mean, we still don't know.
No, it's still open, right?
Still open. I mean, I think the idea of manipulating images and how orthodox some magazines have become on this subject is, it's a subject for another podcast for us. Because if you, for example, take a picture of a wild animal leaping and you kind of digitally erase a blade of grass that is blocking an eye, does that seriously change the impact or the moment? I argue not, but if it's touched at all.
Pictures have been removed from competitions for exactly that because it wasn't in the rules,
That's it. So, that's a subject for another day. But I wanted to bring attention to the first time I experienced a series of pictures that really had profound impact on my aesthetic. And that's Chris Marker, who made a film in '62 called La Jetée. And La Jetée is made up completely of film stills or still images. It's a must to look at.
Isn't every film made? On the sense there is actually technically no such thing as a moving picture.
Yes. However, these are done with a still camera. So they're not 24 still images per second to give the illusion of movement. But actually, there was no movement, so I parry that.
No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be so flippant.
No, please.
Somebody will comment somewhere, though, won't they? If we don't pick it up ourselves, somebody will comment somewhere and say we're talking nonsense.
Let's point at it. Yeah, well, I do anyway, so I'm undefended in that way. But it's worth looking at, and in the show notes, I've posted a YouTube link to the film. I have a book of the images, which in so many ways is a great companion because the narration and the mood and the tone drives the kind of feeling of it and the reality of it in one direction. And when you look at the images on their own, they also tell the same story, but in a different and profound way. So that was in 1962. But as the kind of false narratives kind of gained traction with so many artists, I thought I would just point out a few to discuss some of my favorites, some of my influences, and also some photographers whose work leaves me a little cold emotionally, but technically I have come to appreciate their work. One who I love dearly is a photographer called David Leventhal, and
let me bring something up here on the screen for those who watch the video.
David Leventhal uses toys and small figurines to capture the emotion of combat. And this is a man who straddles a very fine line between recreation and invention. He hides nothing in terms of his statement that he does in fact use these, and they look like models, mannequins, miniatures, toys, and yet the images, his composition, both in color and black and white, demonstrate his uncanny photo ability. He is just a master. His work has become very sought after and is, I think, a very, very fine artist and worth exploring. There's a writer and a director, Stephen Leslie, an Englishman. He also works. He has a new book called Sparks, and his work, he kind of brings a false sense of street photography. A lot of fun. His work is a lot of fun, quite elaborately staged. Obviously, he has a great sense of humor in some way, but these are images that are designed to look like he just grabbed them, and yet they're very, very spectacularly composed in an ordinary way, and they do demonstrate his ability to understand the mundane in a way and recreate it in a way that gives us a different look, and it's expressive in that way. Also worth looking at. Another in a totally different way. There's a photographer here, Linda Miles. She's local. She actually lived very close to my last residence, and she did a false biography, or maybe it's a real biography, but she actually commissioned writers. They wrote her narrative from her descriptive. So she created a screenplay, and then she got actors to play family members and documented her life with actors as told through a narrative that she constructed based on her own reality. And I find her work to be pretty accomplished, both in terms of its aesthetic, its formalism, its mood, and her ability to really find the right moments and direction of actors. And in that way, I think that her work is different than Alex Prager, who we could talk about also, who does a more Hollywoody version of it. In my view, cooler version of it, a more elaborate version of it, technically astoundingly beautiful. And there's always that tension between emotion and technical virtuosity, which we tend to try to balance as photographers, so that these things are not overwhelming by technique, because if they are, it becomes kind of production seduction, and I think robs the emotive quality. And
I think that's a really good point, because that piece of work there, some of it is looks quite professional, and other bits of it look very homemade, deliberately so and designed that way. And when I first saw that, I was like, oh yeah, that's really clever. It's and picking up on what you said about the emotion of stuff as well. Not so much about fictional storytelling, but there's something in my brain tells me that a home video needs to look like a home video, right? Even when I've been out and we've been traveling as a family or something like that, get back, and I wouldn't want it to look like it was shot on an Alexa or with some kind of Panavision camera or something like that. I just wouldn't want that.
That explains your obsession with 720p, by the way.
Quite possibly, yes. Quite possibly.
Boom!
Okay. Fair enough.
Why stop there? Why not 420?
But then, of course,
but I think you're.
Of course, we're conditioned to these things, right? We are conditioned to this. We know what a home movie looks like. So, of course, if you are a photographer and you want to recreate that, you know exactly which way to go visually to recreate a certain feeling within people and to just put it in a certain place.
I think what you've just said is absolutely critical to the historical moves of how we respond to images on a technical level, because I think we look at it at an image with a sense of expectation, and that expectation comes from a lot of things. It comes from our own history. It comes from our kind of visual language and what we understand. It also comes from the historical norms. That's why, if you look at highly pixelated 8-bit imagery, that evokes an era. It doesn't evoke the 70s. It may evoke the 80s, early 90s. Ditto, if you look at salt prints, it evokes a sense of mid-19th century. It doesn't evoke the late 20th century. So I think that technique ties itself often to eras, and it's the eras that, if we seek to imagine images within our own history, we can draw parallels into the techniques that we choose to master, recreate, and emulate. So moving along, before we kind of really get into an open discussion here, Kevin Moore is somebody I really like. Jeff Wall is someone who I've been fascinated for many, many years. His work, again, feels like snapshots of just throwaway cameras, except I think they're 8x10s. They're massive prints. If anybody's ever seen these, I mean, they're 100 inches wide, or 220 by 275 centimeters for those of you in foreign countries. But they are snapshots done in 8x10 style, and just because of that, they have a different feeling, and it's that feeling that it's the tension between, I don't know, how can I describe it? The massiveness, the sharpness, and the subject, and the familiarity of an image that we may have seen together in our kind of home shots that are kind of create something new in
and it creates confusion if you see that familiar thing, but it is a print that's as big as a wall. I mean, that just
Yeah.
makes things different, and it doesn't fulfill our expectations because we're used to like 4x6 prints and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, how do you guys feel about these kinds of works? Like if you took your own imagery and were able to kind of recreate that sharpness and size, how do you think it would change the response?
I think it would. I feel like I'd be more likely to win a fine art prize of some sort.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why I feel like that, but it's sometimes. But in the olden days when you could go to galleries, you'd go sometimes and see sets of prints that have won awards or something like that, and you'd think, okay, yeah, so. Yeah, I'm not sure that I like the photography. So in what way has it impressed the judges, and how? And sometimes it feels like the technique and the struggle is something that has impressed the judges. Sometimes it's the subject matter. So although maybe the images may not be aesthetically pleasing, particularly, or tell a story, they are of impact because perhaps. They are of a particular place. I remember one time, this is some years back, there was a set of images that came from that were shot in the Maze prison in Northern Ireland, which was very famous in the Troubles. And the prize winner had taken, I think, an 8x10 camera, and I believe the prison is now, or that part of the prison is now disused, not derelict, but disused. And so you've got a lot of empty spaces, a lot of use of negative space in these images. And I remember looking at them and thinking, I don't really like these photographs. But then you have then come the afterthought, of course, is the context of it all, the place they were taken, what you know about them, what I used to see on the television news as a child, about hunger strikes and things like that. And so there's definitely a weight that comes.
I think
with these things,
like those Santa Barbara images just from before, like that lady's whole story of coming from Eastern Europe, and like Santa Barbara being the first thing that they saw on TV, her mother taking them away in the middle of the night, all of that kind of feeds into and if you don't know that when you see the image, would it have the same?
Well, that's true.
Resonance.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's a similar point. Thank you, Imar, because that's probably a tighter way of trying to make the point that I was trying to make. Thanks for helping me out.
Yeah,
but I think there's a gravitas that comes with knowing the background and knowing the context and knowing the story. There's something. Yeah. The images themselves. Yeah. Sometimes they need help.
It changes something if you put at the beginning of a movie, this is based on a true story, even if it isn't. See. I don't know, the Blair Witch Project or something. It changes your perception of it. It does do something to how it sets an expectation. Yeah. So, absolutely.
I mean, one of the last exhibits I saw here at Peter Federman's gallery, there was a woman who went to Auschwitz. She's a descendant of survivors and photographed in raw black and white just what she saw there at the end. And one of the most profound images, it's just a shot of a wall with scratch marks on it. That's all. So if you just saw this picture leafing through with no context, you'd think, well, what is it? It just looks like somebody took a stone or something to a wall, until you realize that it was nails on the wall as they were dying. And so now the picture is intensely profound because it's just there. So context in that way really is a tremendous shifter of how we respond to images. And if we look at, going back to something more humorous, if you look at the Jeff Wall pictures, small on your computer, on your phone, you could chuckle, because you're responding to the subject. But they don't have the same profound impact as when you see it in a gallery presented that way, which takes a sort of mundane snapshot approach. Yeah, a good picture. And blows it up so that, as if to say, these random moments that we find on in our life, around us, surrounding us, are much more, appreciate them more. They're bigger than what they appear to be. And if that's the intention, I think he succeeds once
that's really interesting, because that's life, isn't it? Right. So the things that you do day by day, collectively, they make up your life.
Yeah.
So, there's something, some mundane stuff. We have a collection of family photos from when my kids were preschool age. And it's just day-to-day stuff. We went to the park, we did this, and it has, I mean, it wouldn't strike a chord necessarily for anybody outside of our family, but it does for us. And we keep going, years later, we keep going back to it and looking at it, and it's fun, It's really interesting stuff. So, because we're talking a lot about, I know about real events. We've come here and it seems like quite a getting on towards what I guess for us is a deep conversation, but we came at this from the fictional side. And I wonder if we should ask, do we know, when we know things are fictional, can it have the same impact as something that we know is real? Is it even possible?
Well, that often depends on the photographer and how you set the narrative. I mean, the last two photographers that I wanted to talk about both use themselves. Or, I will mention Gregory Crutzen.
It'd be rude not to in this context.
Yeah, because technically Gregory Crutzen's photographs are very much like film stills. They're approached in the same way. They're shot in the same way. I don't even think he touches a camera anymore, but he works with a large crew. They scout, they build, they cast, they light. These are very, very expensive pictures to make, like them or not, in terms of how they kind of evoke that mood. They are very well done and very, very large. Again, do they have the same impact on your phone? I don't think so. But seen in a gallery, 10 feet, they certainly are representative of something.
Can I ask you a question though? Because I think Crutzen falls into a slightly different category for me, because although his work is, it challenges the brain, it stimulates the brain. I don't think he's telling stories. And I have, it's a question I had coming into this conversation, which is that can a single image tell a story? Right? It can prompt a story in your head, perhaps, but I think the answer for some of these is yes. A single image can tell a story.
Some do.
Some don't. For me personally, I find it very rare. It's one of those things that people talk about a lot, and I don't know. Maybe I'm just less imaginative than some, but for me, Crutzen's not telling stories. He's poking our brains with a stick, isn't he?
I don't know. It depends. I mean, some of his work, when you see, say, 10 images from a specific folio in a specific house or area, they do evoke a kind of document of a family, of an individual's loneliness, of the kind of sense of despair in many ways. So I think his work does provoke that. Not all of them, but seen in a unified folio, I think that you would definitely say it's a story.
And is that as a series of images or as a single image?
Well, I think most of them are from a series, yeah. But, these are just demonstrated of single images. I mean, there are two final photographers, I'll talk about Cindy Sherman, who uses herself to model, I don't know if it's much of a story or a narrative, but seen together, it's kind of an imagined narrative of history told through her own changed or manipulated face. Kevin Moore's is along the same lines, but different. I mean, these are both sort of biographical in different ways, one reaching out to a larger sense of history. And Kevin Moore, there we are on screen. His work is again, it looks kind of random. It looks kind of snapshot, but these are carefully constructed and very, very artfully done to provoke an image of, say, alienation or mood, and well worth looking at. His work is very powerful, considering they are all personal and they're all about him. So, that's my overview of what is possible to utilize in photography is to utilize its insistence often of being truthful, and we can open that truthiness to expressions of our own desires, of what we wish were true, of which we hope are true, of which we're recreating the truth that we remember. All of these are really strong tools that in painting, for example, or even in filmmaking, I don't think you achieve the same thing. But in photography, that capability is profound.
Well said.
Please.
Yeah, well
Thank
said
you.
indeed,
This is okay. So there's a lot in this episode. There will be all the links will be in the show notes. So yeah. And by the way, Adrian puts these together every week for you. And
the show notes. Yes,
the show notes. Yeah.
There's plenty to actually. There's going to be lots of stuff for this week because
you missed the show notes.
There's a great bit of research. Great bit of research from Jeremiah.
Yes,
thank you.
Definitely. So let's see. We have arrived at our picks of the week. I'm just opening a couple of links here, and we start with Imar. We haven't heard you in a while. So, what is your pick of the week?
I think that one of the most interesting things I kind of discovered in looking up all that stuff that Jeremiah put into our heads was that kind of assumed that sort of manipulation of photographs is a more modern phenomenon, but really it isn't at all. So people have been doing it forever. But this guy, Jerry Uselman, his stuff's amazing. It's all done on film. So he's got like 6 enlargers, an old man now, but a really fascinating character.
Wow.
And he actually exposes each piece of the photograph separately under a different enlarger.
Oh, he's doing composites? Oh, I see.
Yes, and constructs these from it, and I just think they're incredible. And
yeah, it's funny when I was beginning... Imar, when I was starting out as a photographer, I spent a lot of time studying his work, Gilsman, and was sort of captivated by it, but I didn't like it. I didn't like it because it worked against everything I wanted to do in photography.
Okay.
It just felt. But now I have a completely different appreciation of his work, completely, since I've kind of come out the other end in photography. But when I was, obsessed with just taking a camera out on the street, I thought, oh, this is just crazy. But I think you're right. He is
okay. I'm outing myself.
I'm
I
just
didn't even know he
captivated by
existed.
these, and now I really want to try
I'm seeing
some
these for the first
compositing
time
again.
as well.
They're
actually.
fabulous.
No.
Yeah. Great stuff. Good stuff.
All right. Adrian, how about yours?
Well, my pick of the week this week, actually, I'm pleased to be able to say this is somebody I know and a friend, I guess, in the podcasting sense. So my pick this week is the work of Claire Marie Bailey. She's a member of the Sunny 16 podcast crew, actually. She does.
These are great.
Yeah,
I've seen her work.
Yeah,
I'm sure I've mentioned it before.
I think
to be
you have. have. Yeah, they're great.
But it just fits today really well. So I'm very happy to be able to reshare this. So Claire is heavily influenced by things like B movies of the 1960s. She's a real film buff, and that is reflected in her photography, which she does often with sort of faded and expired Polaroid film and things like that. So it's your classic. For me, this really is fictional storytelling in photography. It's about whether you consider it an alter ego or whether you consider it entirely distanced and fictional. I think it's fantastic work. And hi, Claire.
Cool.
You first.
All right. I have found something. Yep, I'm picking this up here. I found something that has nothing to do with this episode whatsoever, but it certainly has to do something with the future of photography. And you might be aware of a brand called Edelkrone or Edelkrone, which is a kind of fancy brand for sliders, and like for videographers and photographers would use their stuff, like fancy tripod heads and fancy stuff. It's also not very cheap, quite pricey. And they have not invented, but they are employing for some of their products an interesting manufacturing concept. So here's one example. They have a special head that lets you tilt your camera and turn it around on a tripod, and it's called the Flex Tilt. And if you buy this in the United States, it's $149. But if you are one of those people who have a 3D printer, you can buy the metal pieces of that for $29, and then you print the rest. And they have 4 products that do that. So the critical parts, like the parts where things have to be in good tolerances, and the way they slide on each other has to be precise. That's the parts that you buy from them, and the rest, you print yourself, and then you end up with a product that you can customize in terms of the color, and maybe even customize the geometry of other parts. But the basic parts are theirs, awesome. And they call that co-manufacturing.
Love that idea.
Yep. And it's 4 products, but it's 4 interesting products, and for $29 plus some filament and some of your time, you can print your own product. So that's my contribution for today. And last but not least, Jeremiah.
I thought I would be very self-aggrandizing today, and my pick of the week is my website.
There we go.
And I would go to the corner there and go to digital art, and choose the folio on the Great War, because I think that will be more focused on what we're doing here. These are invented images. They are taken from video games. They're manipulated. They're highly manipulated to evoke the feeling and mood of what it must have been like in combat during the Great War. Obviously, taking pictures like this in 1914 was pretty well impossible. But you don't think of that when you look at these things. So again, this is an invented history drawn from real history. But the expression is one that's focused on evoking the mood and feel of real combat.
Great images. I've got have to ask you, have you got any in colour? Because there's as we record this, there's been some internet angst in recent weeks about colorizing of old photos, hasn't there?
You know what? You should take some of those and colorize them. Not shoot them in color, but colorize them after the fact.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I'm in the process of exploring the neural Photoshop coloring aspect of what they are capable of. But I've been doing it with my real photography or my camera work, which one could see if you go up to that little thing. There's the digital work, and then there's the camera work. The camera work, LA Water, for example, or these are good. These are images of the desert. But taking pictures with my Leica monochrome, bringing them into Photoshop, and then adding color to them. And I'll showcase a few when I feel I've gotten control over the process. Sometimes it's just too good. In other words, what I found is, it just looks like a boring color photograph. What the hell am I doing? I could have shot it in color. But to adjust the kind of tonality so that it has that, I don't know, autochrome, faded, whatever, manipulated colors attract me. That's on the horizon. So, in fact, I may not do it to the digital images because I've so run from the color there, because they tend to make it look more realistic in a way, less abstract. I think that the black and white feels more grounded in our expectations of what a document would be, what feel like. But in some of the aesthetic stuff that I'm doing, the more studied stuff, then I'm definitely interested in blending a pure black and white image with control.
And then comes Peter Jackson and takes World War I footage and blows it up to 4K and colorizes it and puts new sound on it. And I mean, so there's a lot of...
That was pretty good.
A lot of lines blending, a lot of layers blending there. Very meta.
And that's the future. That is the future of our medium in so many ways, of what we can expect soon.
Probably.
To be able to do.
All right. I think that's it for today. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll be back in a week. Until then, you can contact us on Twitter at TFOPNow, on the Insta at TFOPNow. We have our Discord that is alive and kicking with photography and showcases and things. I think a few gerbils have now moved into our Discord.
We're having we're definitely having a rodent appreciation time in the
It's Rodent Appreciation Month.
It's not just gerbils. Yeah, it's for the other rodents.
There's squirrels.
Are available.
Squirrels involved.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, if you want to find out more, go to tfttf.com/jointfop. It's on the screen and in the show notes as well. And of course, all our other episodes are wherever you find your podcasts and on thefuturephotography.com. Until next time, everyone, take care and bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.